Thank you very much, and I promise I will be very quick. I'm very much aware of time, and my colleague Laura did all the heavy lifting for me in explaining how to read those results, so I'll get right into it. The objective here was to understand what are the political preferences for institutional reform in New Caledonia. And in this conjoint experiment, we had different options for the level at which decisions are made. So, for example, when we look at decisions made at government level, we looked whether people would prefer majority versus supermajority. When decisions are made at local level, whether people would prefer more decision to be made at municipal, provincial, or at Congress level. We also looked at preferences for the financing of public services, whether this should be financed by New Caledonia, by France, or they should be co-financed. We looked at the role of the customary Senate, whether they should be there in advisory role or they should have veto power. And last, we look at who should have representation in the customary Senate, whether they should be open to all communities or should be Kanak only. This is what the respondents saw in the experiment, so they had to pick one institutional reform package with varying characteristics. When we look at the results by the community, what we can see is that the communities don't disagree on how the decisions should be made. Also means that people don't have very strong preferences. Where people have strong preferences is on the financing of public services, and we can see that everyone would prefer public services to be co-financed. The other aspect where the communities differ, so again, everything that is on the right-hand side of the line means that people have support for that option. Everything that's on the left-hand side means people do not favor that option. So when we look at the role of the customary Senate, we see that Europeans want the customary Senate to have an advisory role only. When we look at the Kanaks in the second panel, we see that obviously they would want the customary Senate to have veto power and not just an advisory role. The other three communities are undecided on this matter. When we look at the representation of identities in the customary Senate, we can see that there is support for all communities to be represented. And this is true for Europeans and for those who identify as other. For the rest, there is some evidence, but we cannot be very certain about it. What this means is that there is little evidence that communities are strongly divided over the basic institutional structure of New Caledonia, and these issues do not divide communities. So there is hope here that these basic institutional formats should be relatively easy to negotiate in the future. The other slide I want to show you is when we split, not by communities, because things get complicated and difficult to read, when we split the responses by the preferences on the future of New Caledonia, here we were a bit more generous with the undecided portion. So we wanted to be a bit more confident in our results. So we split people in the independent, undecided, and part of France. So what we can see here is that, like previously when we split by community, communities are not very divided when it comes to making decisions at government or at local level. We can see that everyone still wants co-financing of public services. I think one important takeaway is that those who are undecided mirror those who want New Caledonia to be part of France. If we look at this panel here, it mirrors this one. And then obviously those who would want independence, they would like the customary Senate to have veto power. And the last slide I'm going to show you is that when we split the results by a vote on a referendum, again, communities are not very divided because a lot of our dots and their confidence interval cross the zero line. Where communities are divided is on the role of the customary Senate and on the role of the customary Senate. People agree on the co-financing of public services, and the respondents would also like to see all communities represented in the customary Senate. These are very preliminary results. We're still wrapping our heads around it, but this is what the data we collected last year shows us. And just to remind everyone that the data were collected last autumn, and they represent, the snapshot we were able to take at that point in time. And thank you very much for your patience and attention.